A native North Carolinian, Congressman Jones is a key member in today's liberty movement. He serves North Carolina District 3, which covers the Outer Banks and counties around Pamlico Sound. And since 1994, he has won the district with overwhelming support each time. Despite his Freedom Fries initiative years ago, he has now gained renown for his prominent stance against military interventionism and has supported numerous anti-war bills in the House of Representatives. In 2008, he endorsed Congressman Ron Paul and is now considered one of YAL's most pro-liberty members in Congress. He's a practicing man of faith and is writing a book called God Forgive Me. So, I present to you our speaker, Representative Walter Jones.
I appreciate the warm response and look forward to sharing my views. They wanted me to speak primarily on why I changed my mind on the Iraq War. And now I am very outspoken about bringing our troops home from Afghanistan. I do not have the military background that many people do, maybe even some in this room today. But I think I want to give credit to the man that really helped me understand that if you're ever going to send young men and women to die, it needs to be a Constitution debate by the Congress, and not these frivolous resolutions like George Bush's resolution. Mr. Obama's bypassing Congress to bomb Libya. So I want to talk about the Iraq War, how I changed my position, and then a little bit about Afghanistan, and see what questions you might have. I know you've been here all afternoon, and I'm not going to keep you much longer because I think I can share my heart with you in about 20 minutes, and then we'll see if you have any questions. The reason I want to write the book, I've already hired a writer out of my own retirement plan. Too many times in Washington, nobody ever apologizes, especially when you send young men and women to die. We apologize if we get caught by the police driving drunk. Or if we have an affair, then we apologize. But never does anyone apologize for buying into a lie to send young men and women to die. So if anything else comes from trying to write a book, and if you've ever tried or if you haven't, it's not that easy. I've been keeping notes ever since we went into Iraq, but I need a professional to help me put everything together and present a manuscript to a publishing company. And certainly at that time they might say we have no interest in this at all. But during the Bush administration's drumbeat for war, I went to all the briefings. I listened to Rumsfeld. I listened to Condoleezza Rice. I listened to all General Myers, and one time Dick Cheney, and Colin Powell. And I never believed what they were saying. I never believed that Saddam Hussein, who yes, I would agree was an evil dictator, but was he responsible for 9/11? Absolutely not. He had nothing to do with it. You had more to do with it than he did. That's really how indifferent he was to 9/11. He had no weapons of mass destruction. It was all manufactured by the Bush administration and Dick Cheney. And probably none of you watch MSNBC. But I would refer you to last Monday night, one of the best documentaries I've ever seen on the Iraq War was done. It was done by Michael Isikoff, who wrote the book Hubris, The Selling of the Iraq War. He interviewed me 4 months ago as he was putting this documentary on TV together. If you can go on your website, look it up. It's 9 o'clock. It's the Rachel Maddow time. But if you really want to get your eyes widened, look at the lie that we were told. It's generals, it's scientists, it's CIA people. And yet, where was the outrage by the American people? Where was the outrage by my party? There was none. Do not understand the American people why. There's nothing more important than to take an 18 or 19-year-old young man or woman who don't have maybe the finances to go to college, so maybe they're going in the military just to serve their country and hopefully get a chance for a college education. And then when you have an administration that doesn't really think that sending them to die really matters, it's a sad day for America. After I cast my vote to give President Bush the authority, if necessary, to go into Iraq, I regret that I did not vote my conscience. That night that I walked to the floor to vote, I left the office by telling my Chief of Staff, Ben Downs, I'm not convinced Saddam had one thing to do with 9/11. But I have a military district, as the gentleman that introduced me. It includes Camp Lejeune. It includes Cherry Point. And we have 60,000 retired military in the 3rd District of North Carolina, which I represent. So that night I walked to the floor. My faith was not strong enough to vote my conscience. I was more concerned about getting reelected. And I regret that, and I will to the day I die. Because I did not serve, and I've seen the broken bodies of Walter Reed. I see the amputated legs. I've seen the paralysis. I've seen the moms, the wives, the fathers crying, knowing that that young man, that young woman will never, never be the same again. War is serious. And those of us who make the policy have an obligation to the Constitution and not to either party just to follow what they say is mandatory or necessary. I went to the funeral of Michael Bitts. He was killed the week of March the 23rd, shortly after we went into Iraq. I got a call from Elton Gallagher, a now retired member of Congress from California. He called me up. He said, "Walter, I had a constituent based at Camp Lejeune who was just killed, named Michael Bitts, Sergeant Bitts. Will you help the family? The mother-in-law is visiting from Australia. They had 3 children. They had twins that were born after he was deployed. Almost weeks after he's deployed, the twins were born." So I called Janina Bitts. She's from Australia. And I said, "Ms. Bitts, I'm terribly sorry. I don't know what to say to you that your husband's been killed. But what can we do to help?" And it was just to extend the mother's passport so she could help with the children, babies actually, the twins. So for whatever reason, God at that point said, "I'm disappointed that you joined the crowd and voted with the crowd. You did not stand strong and trust me to defend you." So about 10 days later, the Marine Corps called me, not Mrs. Bitts, to tell me that the body had been returned. There would be a funeral at Camp Lejeune. I felt guilt to the point that I had to go. So I called the Marine Corps at Camp Lejeune and said, "I'll be driving myself, and I want to go to the funeral of Michael Bitts." In fact, I'm sure the Marine Corps did tell Miss Bitts, but I did not call her and say, "I'm coming to your husband's funeral." So the day of the funeral, it was in the first weekend, I think, of April. And it was an absolutely beautiful day with a blue sky. The funeral was outside of a office building facing New River, which you could see through the wire fence. And as I walked around the building, I was escorted by a captain. I saw the flag-draped coffin, and I saw two young Marines at the head and the foot of the coffin. And I walked around. I talked to Mrs. Bitts by phone, but I never met her. She was a beautiful young lady. And not the twins, but the oldest child was named Joshua, and he was 3 to 4 people down from her in a little stroller. So I sit down beside Miss Bitts, and I tell her I'm very sorry that her husband had been killed. So then the order of the day was that the Marine captain brings the folded flag, puts it in her lap, and I'm sitting right beside it. It's an outdoor service, and I've got my sunglasses on. And puts it in her lap, and she says, "Thank you." Then the Navy chaplain reads a verse from the Bible. At this time, the captain has moved around to the far side of the tent, near the child in the stroller, but maybe 4 or 5 people down. And then the Baptist minister got up and spoke about how active Michael and Janina were in the church as a young couple. Then the last point, she read a 3-page letter that he had written in the back of the Humvee the day before he was killed. She has given me a copy of that letter, and I intend to write her. She's remarried and lives in Australia. I intend to write her and ask her if I can use parts of the letter her husband wrote her, and I certainly would identify the parts for her okay to put in the book. The last paragraph was a paragraph such as, "I've never cheated on you. I love you with all my heart." She's reading this and crying at the same time. And those of us sitting under the tent, I was crying. Then he closed by saying, "I do not know whether God wants me to return to you on earth or we will be together in heaven." And he was killed the next day. In fact, later on, Camp Lejeune, I sat with his wife when she accepted the Silver Star posthumously. War is hell. And those who have never been to war like myself have no business frivolously voting for any resolution from any president, be Republican or Democrat, who wants to send our young men and women to war. During that period of time, when about 2 years later, now Ron Paul did not vote for the resolution. Ron has been one of my best friends in Congress. I miss him today, but he's not there. But in 2005, Neil Abercrombie, who's now the governor of Hawaii, is a member of Congress, introduced a resolution to bring the troops home. I joined Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul and Neil Abercrombie at a press conference. It's well covered. Almost as many press people as here today, is that large, who wanted to hear these 4 members of Congress, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, to announce that we want to bring our troops home now in 2005, and it would be a matter of months. It wouldn't be today or tomorrow, obviously. At that time, I started getting hate mail from the 3rd District of North Carolina. And those people who believe the neocons lie about the justification. It got to a point that I really felt that if I was not to be reelected, that was the price I was paid to God for not following my conscience. As it went on, a lot of the liberal press, as you can imagine, picked up on this freedom fry Republican coming out against the war. So it became not national news, I don't want to imply that, but second and third pages of bigger papers would have this congressman from North Carolina comes out against the war. I determined that if I was not to be reelected, life would go on. I was much younger at the time. But I knew that those who do not fight, like myself, it's easy to be macho man and declare war. Get that son of a bitch, but with your child, with this young man, that young woman. Let them go fight. I am so fed up with people that do not understand the pain of war. During that period of time, a couple more points, and I'm going to get to the Afghanistan, then we'll go to questions. During that period of time of being accused of everything from disloyal to President Bush and loving the terrorists, and it just got wild. It really did. It led us to the editors, a few editorials that were not very friendly. I got a call from a senator who I did not know, named Chuck Hagel. He came to my office one afternoon from a committee, and the young lady in my office said, "Congressman, Senator Hagel wants you to call him." I said, "Senator Hagel, I don't know him." She said, I knew who he was, don't get me wrong. She said, "Well, he wants you to call him." So he had already come out against the Iraq War. So I called him, and he said, "Walter, it took a lot of courage to do what you did, and I'd like to meet with you." So I went over to his office. We sat down. It's 3 in the afternoon, and he likes hot tea. Offered me hot tea, so I drank hot tea with him. And he said, "You're right. There were never weapons of mass destruction." He said, "There were never weapons of mass destruction." He said, "I want to do you a favor." He was on the Senate Intel Committee at that time. He said, "I'm going to get my top staffer, a young man who had been an Intel officer in the military and then got out and joined the staff." He said, "I want Eric to spend as much time as he needs to show you the classified information. I have the clearance, so it was okay for me to see it on the House. I'm a House member of the Armed Services Committee." So anyway, for about 4.5 weeks, Eric took me up to the classified room in Washington, D.C. on the Senate side where they have a guard sitting out there. You just don't walk in and walk out. We averaged about 2 nights a week, and he would take as much time as I needed to go through the maps, look at locations where the administration had said this is where we think the weapons of mass destruction are planted. That was a huge help to me. People criticize Chuck Hagel. I don't like John McCain. I appreciate what he's done for our country. I sympathize that he had to be a POW, but I still don't agree with him on his war policies. And I will tell you that Chuck Hagel, when I saw Senator McCain jump all over him, and he said to Senator Hagel, "Will you say the surge worked or didn't work?" Well, I was opposed to the surge. The Democrats were the majority, and Ike Skelton, the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, gave me 30 minutes of their time to handle on the floor as the floor manager. And I got, including my friend Ron Paul, I got 6 Republicans to come to the floor and speak against the surge. And I did go on the floor recently after that exchange with Senator McCain. You cannot call, it's a matter of protocol, you don't call a senator's name. You can say a senator, but not the name on the floor. And during the period of 5 minutes, I went on the floor and I praised Chuck Hagel. And I said, I will answer for him. Did the surge work? No, it did not work. 1,200 Americans were killed. Thousands of Iraqis killed. And look at Iraq today, it is in total chaos. So did it work? I don't think so. But Chuck Hagel will be the Secretary of Defense. He'll get a few Republican votes, and I want to thank those Republicans when the time comes. But most of them will vote in opposition to him. I like him. I trust him. I think he's a man of integrity. He was a non-commissioned officer in Vietnam, wounded twice. He's created a successful business and ran for the Senate. Last point on Iraq. If you watch this show, and I really wish you would, no matter how you feel about MSNBC or Rachel Maddow, I don't watch it much myself, but they did as good a job with generals, CIA, the nuclear science at the University of Virginia that said these aluminum tubes, there's no way you could get nuclear energy inside of it because of the size of it. And he speaks very bluntly about, I was told by the Department of Energy that these aluminum tubes would not be used for any device that could create an atomic energy, weapons or mass destruction. I met with General Zinni. He's also he's 4-star Marine General, retired. He had been the central commander in that area of the Middle East. He said, Congressman, I talked with Richard Butler whenever I wanted to UN inspector. He said Saddam did not have weapons of mass destruction. It was a bluff by Saddam to really try to concerned about the Iranians thinking he did not have that kind of weapon. General Zinni said, think about it, for 12 years we flew over Iraq, they never even shot the paint off of a plane. Their weapons were so degraded that they were not even major weapons. The last point on Afghanistan, because of my terrible mistake on Iraq, I called the former commandant of the Marine Corps, as a friend of mine. I said, General, he's retired, I said, General, I made a mistake on Iraq. I don't want to make a mistake on Afghanistan. Will you advise me? He said, yes, on one condition. You will not use my name in print, in interviews, TV, or on the floor of the House. You're welcome to use my words, but not my name. Because active duty generals don't care what retired generals think. I would tell you, knowing this man, if I could say his name, probably no one in here would know it, but maybe one or two. He is revered and respected by active duty generals. But I have followed his wishes. I have followed his wishes. Just a couple of points. Afghanistan is a failed policy. We're spending $235 million a day in Afghanistan. Well, what would that do if we kept a little bit of that here in America? That's almost $8 billion a month being spent, and it's borrowed money. We're not going to change the history of Afghanistan if you stay there 100 years. And here we are with Mr. Obama saying, well, we're going to come out in 2014, but they've already signed a bilateral strategic agreement with Afghanistan for the next 10 years. For the next 10 years. The general said this. These are always emails to my questions, by the way. Jim McGovern and I wrote a letter. He's the liberal from Massachusetts. We joined together to write a letter to Mr. Obama to say, bring the troops out now. Don't wait. Bring them out now. The general said, and I'll be very brief, I thought the letter to Obama was well written, cogent, and spot on. At the end of the day, we're not dealing with a true nation state. As such, there are no true state actors to deal with. Attempting to find a true military and political answer to the problems in Afghanistan would take decades, not years, and drain our nation of precious resources, with the most precious being our sons and daughters. Simply put, the United States cannot solve the Afghan problem, no matter how brave and determined our troops are. Then at the end, he said, my goodness, does the administration actually believe they can achieve the goal by supporting a corrupt government who has no chance of surviving? Do they even think that Al-Qaeda even cares about Afghanistan now? Those folks have left us long ago. They are now in Yemen, Africa, yes, the United States, continuing to frail about Afghanistan with the mission of ensuring no safe haven in Afghanistan is akin to playing the child's game of whack-a-mole. Al-Qaeda just pops up anywhere. We need to bring our people home and prepare for the real danger that is growing in the Pacific. I have been very, very upset. We even had David Whissen, who wrote the book, Funding the Enemy, subtitle, How U.S. Taxpayers Are Bankrolling the Taliban. I had him on a couple of talk shows here, Bill and May, as a matter of fact. A couple of talk shows here in the Research Triangle. That's why I wanted to be here today. Most of you are libertarian, more so than I am, to be honest about it. But most of you are libertarian. I know this about my friend Ron Paul, who's a libertarian, that the Constitution matters. And if you don't follow the Constitution, you will fail. My disappointment is with my own side. Not just because I got kicked off committee. This happened before that, as a matter of fact. I put a resolution in 2 years ago, and most of the conservative libertarian radio stations had me on about this. It was very simple. It followed the Constitution. Any president that, without provocation, determines on his or her own that it's justified to go in and bomb a nation that is not a threat to America, like Libya. Gaddafi was an evil man, let's face that. Lockerbie, he was involved in that. He's an evil man, but in the last few years, he's done nothing to threaten America. And Mr. Obama didn't even come to Congress. I'll at least give George Bush that. As bad as it was, he at least came to Congress and asked the Congress, which my mistake, to vote to give him the authority if necessary. But for God's sakes, where's the Constitution? I went to the federal courts with Ron Paul and Tim Johnson and myself and Dennis Kucinich with Professor Jonathan Turley, constitutional law professor at George Washington University. We went to the federal courts to say what Mr. Obama had done to bypass Congress and bomb Libya was a breach of the Constitution. Sadly, it got thrown out. The courts have yet to take up anything that has any meaning to a policy involving the Constitution, because they always say, you, the Congress, have the power of the purse. Well, believe me, once you send the kids to die, it's very hard, and I'll be the first to say it, to cut off the money to buy their weapons, their ammunition, and other things that they need overseas. I reintroduced that resolution, and my frustration, I met with Eric Cantor a year ago. I had letters from Jonathan Turley, Tom Campbell, former member of Congress, law professor in California, wrote letters that I hand-carried to Cantor asking for just a hearing. I said, Eric, I don't care if you move the resolution or not, but this Congress for too long has not debated the role of Congress when it comes to war. Started with this as the vehicle, hold a hearing, bring in some of the experts, let them testify. I never had that done. I'm going to reach out to the libertarians this year like never before and say, put the pressure on the leadership. I will say this without any malice. I don't even think John Boehner has ever visited Walter Reed. I don't think he's ever seen the broken bodies. He's a good and decent man. Maybe he does care, and I just don't know it. But in my heart, I don't think he has. Mr. McGovern and I, you saw in the paper yesterday or today, this administration has committed 100 advisors to Mali in Africa. That has shades of Vietnam. That's had all started in Vietnam with advisors. I think there are other ways that we can impact and influence the continent of Africa. The last point, then I'm going to take the questions. When Mr. Bush was the president, Senator Obama and Senator Clinton put in a bill to provide for congressional oversight of the United States agreement with the government of Iraq. This bill before me today It's co-sponsored by one of the most liberal members of Congress, Rosa DeLorme from Connecticut. It's my bill I put in. We're going to try to start reaching out and getting other members. The only thing we changed is the same title, except to provide for congressional oversight of the United States agreement with the government of Afghanistan. I have no idea that my leadership will even move it. They want to play this game. Eisenhower hit a home run when he said, beware of the military-industrial complex. They run this country. And they are able to have so much money that they go to a Democrat's fundraiser, they go to a Republican's fundraiser. And I do not see it unless you, the American people, and you, the youth of this country, as those speakers, that panel of 4, and they nailed it, they were right. It's up to you to change this country. Because what we're doing in Washington with all this growth of government and spending is absolutely cheating your future. But if nothing else I leave you with, please think about your fellow young man and woman that maybe felt that he or she needed to go in the military for education, to better themselves for whatever reason. Because I've seen them. You probably know some yourself who have been severely wounded. They are the next tsunami for this country. And nobody's talking about it. The astronomical cost to take care of them. And they have earned every dollar that it costs. Let me take a few of your questions. It's 6:30. I don't know what time you wanted to break, but then I've got a certain way I'd like to close if you don't mind. I'll go to you, this young lady, and this young man.
There, thank you. That's a great question. Again, thank you for your service. Yes, there is an effort, but that effort is always stifled. I'm going to explain this in just a moment. By the leadership. Bill Dillahunt, who's a former prosecutor of Whitey Bulger, if that name means anything to you, crime boss in Boston years ago, just got arrested about a year ago. He was a federal prosecutor that prosecuted the case, Bill Dillahunt. He's now left Congress. He's from Massachusetts. But he and I co-sponsored legislation to rewrite the War Powers Act. And we did get a hearing. We had some testimony from outside groups. And that's when the Democrats were in charge. As a matter of fact, Bill's a Democrat. We were not able to move it to a full committee hearing. When the Democrats became the majority, I worked with Bruce Fine, who's a constitutional lawyer. I'm not a lawyer, you probably already know that from my speech. But I went to Bruce Fine and I looked at the statute, and there's no way in this country you can prosecute a president who has intentionally manipulated the intelligence to justify war. So we put a bill in, I put a bill in with his help, to make it from the day of enactment forward that if it could be proved through legislative hearings and testimony that a president had lied to the American people, then that president could be prosecuted. Congress from Michigan and I have this strange relationship. They always say strange bedfellows in bed or whatever it is. But anyway, I was able to get, when I put the bill in, Mr. Conyers gave me a hearing. They were the majority at the subcommittee level. My friends on the Republican side did not like it. But anyway, we, at a subcommittee level, you do take a vote to move the bill forward. But there was enough for the Democrats that they could move it to the full committee. But when we got to the full committee, Mr. Conyers wanted to hold a hearing and a vote. But Lamar Smith from Texas, who was a ranking member at that time, said no. So Bruce Fein and I went to meet with Lamar Smith. Lamar's an attorney. Bruce is a constitutional expert. We talked with him, and Lamar is a good guy. But his comment to us was, well, I'm afraid that the Democrats will demagogue the war, the Iraq War, and Bush and Cheney. I cannot support it going to the full committee. I have no malice toward Lamar. I have respect for him. But that, again, is the problem. Congress will not hold anyone to blame. Lyndon Johnson is probably rotting in hell right now because of the Vietnam War. He probably needs to move over for Dick Cheney. And I'll come to you next. I'll come to you next. Did you have a question? Oh, it's this lady. I'm sorry, Steve.
First of all, as a former war supporter myself, I want to thank you for your comments and your humility. And back in 2007, 2008, when I first started realizing how terrible the war was, the main anti-war sentiment was from the left, the mainstream left. And now that movement is all but gone. And we start to see anti-war sentiment from the right. Do you see this as a permanent thing that the right or the Republicans are starting to question war, or do you see it as something that kind of depends on who's in power at the time?
Thank you for your question as well. I think what has happened is that the public has given a pass on war to both parties. Because, not you, because I don't know you. The North Carolina Peace Coalition about a year ago held a meeting at the legislative building in Raleigh. It was pretty well filled with probably 90% of the attendants my age, or older. I'm 70. A few young people, and again, working, college, understanding. I would give anything. In fact, if anybody thinks on this after I'm gone, they would call me. It was good. It was covered by the News and Observer and a couple other people. I wasn't the only speaker, but obviously being a Republican, I was David Price, but I was the attention, so to speak. Douglas Wilson, who wrote the book I mentioned earlier, Funding the Enemy, got so much of our money is going to the Taliban. We send it to the village leader. He ends up giving half of it to the Taliban to buy weapons and kill our kids. Anyway, that's the way it is. I've tried to get the North Carolina Peace Coalition. I got Douglas Wilson on Bill LeMay's show, and he was willing to come down here if we could put together some type of rally. And he's back over in Afghanistan. And his email said he'd like to meet with me when he gets back. I think he's coming back in late March or April. But I don't know where the outrage is anymore. I really don't. Again, I don't fault people that it's just something missing. I mean, the country's financially broke. We borrow money from China. We want to stay in Afghanistan 10 more years. I mean, if I was 25 years younger, maybe 30 years younger, I had a young family, I'll tell you what, I'd be raising hell about it. Because I see what's coming out of my paycheck is coming out of your paycheck, and I know where it's going. And it's not fair, it's not right to young people in this country. That's why I was honored to be asked to be here today. I don't get anything if anybody at this meeting today, when you go back, whether you're in college, out of college, and you could think you could put together 100 kids. I would think I could get Douglas Wilson to come down here. We would get him some interviews in newspapers and radio. But I think if you could get a group of 100 kids and you want this man that has spent 5+ years now in Afghanistan working with our military, seeing the graft, the fraud, everything else that's going on over there with the taxpayers' money, and more importantly, it's going to buy weapons to kill Americans, and it's the taxpayers' money. Where in the world does that make any sense? Yes, sir.
And I'm sure you're well aware, the Pentagon has lifted its ban on women to serve in combat. Do you think women will be included in the selective service registration in the future, and what is being done to prevent a possible draft from returning in the future? Should we get involved in another major war in the Middle East?
Well, two things. I am not in favor of the women being in the front line. It has nothing to do with their ability. I don't have a military background, and I've talked to gunny sergeants, I've talked to captains, I've talked to generals. There are some things that women can do well. Carrying that 80-pound pack on the back is tough. It's tough for a lot of men too, by the way. I'm fine with women being fighter pilots. I would tell you this, Mr. Rangel wanted to put a bill in to renew the draft. I think if he did it today, I would probably support it. I would not at that time. Because if that doesn't do anything else but force the moms and dads to get word about a war and a draft, like the Vietnam War, where is that energy to say 55,000 have died for what? We're trading with them, man. They're our buddies. It makes no sense. But we'll see. I think there is, if Congress, I think there's a frustration with the fact that we're wearing out our military. If I take these two, and this will have to be the last, because y'all need to get a break, and I've got to drive home tonight, so I'll go to you, and then this gentleman, then I'll play.
I have a question, a little bit more just general political question as an insider. I consider myself a Republitarian, okay? Maybe Republican going libertarian kind of view, okay? So I'm kind of, I think, where a lot of people really are, but they don't know where they are. My question is, from an insider's view, you were friends with Dr. Paul. Why didn't the Republican Party, can you tell me the reality or the truth kind of on the ground, why didn't the Republican Party embrace, kind of combine some of the good things that were being spoken about? I come from a heavy Republican area. A lot of my friends, they're registered Republicans. They looked at Ron Paul and, older people agreed with a lot of the things, but didn't agree with everything, okay? But why, what's the reason? Is it the leadership up the ranks don't assimilate it, or are there the Karl Roves at the top just shutting it down? What's the reality from your perspective?
Ron Paul and his movement are not respected. We signed a letter to the group, and some of these were not really where Ron Paul is, but they thought it's a matter of fairness. We asked the Republican Party that he speak at the convention. It had been turned away 4 years ago, as you know, in Minnesota. They don't respect him, and I think in a way they fear him, quite frankly. Because his movement primarily is young people. He's older than I am.
I mean, is it that simple, though? Is it as simple as,
yeah.
Oh, we don't want to hear from that guy?
No, it's exactly, they can't control him, and he is going to speak the truth as he sees the truth. And that's why he has been shunned by the Republican Party, and they only need him when they're desperate.
They weren't desperate in November.
Well, they did, you're right. They didn't give him a chance. They acknowledged they ran. I was a small part of the little film they ran, but they did not give him the respect that he deserved to have 20 minutes in the national spotlight.
But and I don't mean to take it too long, but I understand that on a personal level. They don't respect him, but are they not open-minded enough to see some of his, some of those philosophies, regardless that it was his? Let's take him out of the equation. Is there no debate? There's no conversation. There's no way to kind of push through some of the good things.
I think I've heard the four speakers earlier talking about the future, so I'm going to say, in the future, as the Republican Party becomes smaller and smaller, I think out of necessity, they're going to reach out to the libertarians. Now, whether the libertarians say, thank you, but no, because they remember the history getting to that point, I don't know. I don't know. Yes, sir.
In your, thank you, by the way, for coming and speaking with us. And while you were talking, you showed equal concern for, or at least you gave equal weight to the lives of American citizens and innocents killed abroad. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the policy of drone strikes, because a lot of people justify them because it...
I think they're absolutely unconstitutional. They are absolutely dangerous. For when that drone comes to America from a foreign country, we're going to wonder, what in the hell hit us? It was a drone. There's always going to be payback in life, whether in public life or private life. And I feel like it is, if the Congress would just seriously look at the damage that we're doing internationally to the reputation of America. That's one reason I didn't vote for the last 2 or 3 NDAA bills, National Defense Authorization. Because the Senate put the language in there to give the president, I don't care if it's a conservative president or a liberal president. That is just scary and it's unconstitutional. So I'm hopeful that we will be having hearings and debates about the issue of the drones. I think it's kind of like a game that's out of control. There's no end to the game. And I think I had heard that, I'm trying to verify this, that America, I've not been able to verify, so maybe it was erroneous information, but that America has agreed to sell the United Arab Republic or to transfer drones to them. And I had already called my staff if I can verify it, like the president. You're going to put right in the terrorist backyard drones with a country that might have been involved with 9/11. To me, it's just bad policy. My close is this. Y'all have been most gracious and kind to give me this much time, and I'd like to appreciate every question that was asked, every statement that I heard. I appreciate very much. I've signed right now over 10,000. I'm going to tell this story now, then I'm going to finish. A month, back in the spring, I had a busy day in Washington. I had the North Carolina Medical Society come in at 11:30. About 11:20, my staff came in and said, there's a lady from Missouri that's up here on the conference that would like to come in and thank you for a letter. And I said, well, I'm expecting the Medical Society, but I think I know. So I went out, and her name's Teresa Stark. Ms. Stark, how are you? Fine. She said, Congressman, you wrote me a letter, and it meant more to me than the president's letter. And I just happened to be in Washington, and I wanted to come by and thank you. So she came in, and so thank God for it. The Medical Society came at 12:05, so we had 30 minutes to talk. She said, when my son Christopher, and she showed me the picture, the handsome young man, when my son Christopher, 21, was killed in Afghanistan, and they brought his body back home for the church service, and it was military service also. When the preacher was praying, was speaking about Christopher, I started thinking, when I was pregnant with Christopher in my stomach, my husband, his father, was killed in a car accident. And she said, all of a sudden, I got a peace about me because I could see Christopher smiling and running to his earthly father in heaven. And she said, all of a sudden, I received God's grace. I was at peace with the death of my son. So my close is this. I ask God to please bless our men and women in uniform. I ask God to please bless the families of our men and women in uniform. I ask God in His loving arms to hold the families who've given a child dying for freedom in Afghanistan and Iraq. I ask God to please bless you on your journey of life, and to bless the libertarian organizations and the conservative organizations that are trying to save America. I ask God to please bless the House and Senate in Washington, D.C., that we will do what is right in the eyes of God for God's people today and God's people tomorrow. And even though I don't agree with the President, I will ask God to please bless the President of the United States, that he will do what is right in the eyes of God for God's people today and God's people tomorrow. And 3 times I will ask, God please, God please, God please bless America, and thank you for this opportunity.